Welcome to the FNO InsureTech Podcast, a place where movers and shakers from all points within the insurance ecosystem gather and discuss all things InsureTech. Here are your hosts, Lee Boyd and Rob Beller.
Hey, podcast world, welcome to this week's fabulous edition of FNO InsureTech, your one and only source for everything you need to know about anything.
Mm-hmm. Insurance plus.
That is
Insurance
not true.
plus.
That is not true. The
Oh,
question
you're
is, you know what? There's so much information. It's an enormous overload of information. I mean, we're bombarded all the time. If you own a phone and you're not bombarded with information, then you have a flip phone, right?
Yeah, or your notifications turned off. Yeah.
Or right. So that's why you should listen to our podcast, because we're very specific in what we talk about.
I didn't know where you're going with that, but that's so true. We're very specific. So when you want your insurance technology news, you come to us. You come to us.
We're not going to talk about this subject or that subject.
No. We're not talking about the Oscars. We're not talking about the Grammys.
Nope.
talking
Even though
about
I watch the
IoT.
Oscars, I love the Oscars.
Oh, it was a delight.
I'm an Oscar lover.
Yeah.
I
Adam
watched the red
Sandler.
carpet.
Adam Sandler did great.
He was great.
Yeah.
I watched the red carpet.
Well, who doesn't? That's why it's on 15 channels. I mean, it's a pretty popular time.
It's the whole thing is interesting, but you're not going to hear us talk about that.
We don't talk about that. We don't talk
We're
about pop culture.
Politics? No.
No, we don't talk about that. I talk about it right before it starts, but we typically stop. Stop.
Religion?
No.
Nope.
No.
Nope. What else?
Well, I can
Math?
really.
No.
Well, yeah, sometimes math.
Travel? Maybe a little.
Maybe a little. But we do talk about insurance, InsureTech.
We do talk about InsureTech and its impact and relevance to insurance, which is why they call it InsureTech.
That's true.
And not just tech.
Yeah, that's true.
We're not just insure.
Do you think our audience is like, come on, guys, get this thing over with? Give us the
Can you
news.
please move
Please
along?
stop.
Where's the button so I can? Where's the
30-second fast forward? 30
so I
second
can
fast
scrub
forward.
through this?
That's exactly what's
Cubs
going on
awry.
right now.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. You think it's easy being us? No.
No. We've been told many times it's not. Many times.
Yeah, but mostly by our wives.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They still are, we gave up years ago even trying to get them to listen. We'll be at dinner with somebody and they're like, oh, you're on a podcast? I am. My wife just rolls her eyes.
If you ask my wife, what's the name of your husband's podcast? No idea.
No.
None whatsoever.
No. There's no way they know.
No. And do we talk about our wives on the podcast? No.
Sometimes.
Not much.
Very
We
rarely.
talk about InsureTech. And speaking of which, that's a great lead-in for today's guest.
Is it? Is it now?
Because it's not a technology.
Our guest today is not associated with the technology?
It's associated, but it is not specifically a technology, right?
You are correct.
Not a
It is
purveyor, not a creator, not an inventor of technology.
No.
Our guest today invented a service to install water devices on homes.
Yeah, which is a lot of times referred to as the last mile, right? It's the most difficult thing in an IoT device is getting it installed. And our guest today has decided that, hey, that's a need. I can create a company. That's a problem. I can create a company and I can solve that problem. It's that easy.
Paul Vacquier, who came out of the water industry, created a company called Beagle Services. And Paul is with us today, founder and CEO of Beagle Services.
Yeah, and Paul's going to come on. He's going to talk all about kind of the founding, where the name came from, and then what they're doing. He's also going to touch a little bit about IoT devices and kind of the evolution and how they're evolving So it's a great listen. Paul's a really exciting guy. And we got his name from a past guest. I don't know if you want to throw that one out, Rob, but one of our past guests kind of really wanted us to have him on.
So these are known as his business is built around water shutoff valves, which are valves that are put in your water line to shut off your water. It's an IoT device. And the king nerd of all water detection, water shutoff devices is none other than our friend of the podcast, Adam Kostecki.
Yeah.
Right? Adam,
Great for him.
if you want Adam to have a good time for a few hours, put him in front of a water shutoff valve. And
he'll enjoy it thoroughly.
And he recommended Paul. And so thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Adam.
And you guys can do the same thing.
You can.
Every listener of this program has the same right to send us an email and say, hey, you know what? You should have these people on.
Right.
Right?
It's the way to do it. That's how you get the people you want to hear, by recommending.
That's right.
We're okay with that.
We're okay with that. So now that you know what we're okay with, we will move to our interview. Without further ado, here is Paul Vacquier, founder and CEO of Beagle Services. Hey, everybody. We're here with our special guest who we have to say right up front has been like a prince of a wonderful person, because we've had all kinds of changes at FNO InsureTech. And it's so, and a lot of it has rained down on him in particular. Mm-hmm. And so we have with us today Paul Vacquier, the founder and CEO of Beagle Services, not Bagel Services.
That's the next company.
That's the next company. That's right. And Paul, first of all, thank you for your patience in getting on board with the podcast, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. We want everybody to be envious, so let's start by saying, where are you today?
I live in San Diego, California, and it's been home for my youth, and then I was gone for a couple decades, and then just returned recently.
Yeah,
one of my very favorite cities.
We were saying that anybody who doesn't live in San Diego has probably never been to San Diego, which is a really wonderful place. And we're glad you're here, and you're here today to talk all about Beagle and where it comes from. So let's just jump right in and talk about Beagle Services, and tell us what it is and what you do there.
So Beagle is focused on prevention of non-weather water damage claims. So we are insurance, kind of first and foremost, from a thought process on how to prevent the number one cause of preventable homeowners insurance claims. So non-weather water damage is a major loss cause. It's the largest loss cause that's preventable for homeowners insurers, and it's incredibly disruptive to anybody who's ever experienced it on a personal note. So Beagle's focus is on becoming the how to solve that for carriers and brokers and clients.
So by the how, what do you mean? I guess give us a little more insight into that.
Yeah, so over the last 20 years, there's been an ever evolving, in a great way, sense of technology and entrance into the space that are trying to solve that problem from a technological standpoint. Beagle understands that, but all of those manufacturers, as well as the homeowners and the partners, meaning carriers and insurance agents and warranty companies and security companies that are interested in trying to prevent that kind of loss and get adoption of that technology, all need the last mile of deployment.
Yeah.
So as you look at a macro environment around decreasing new entrants into trade labor, you have retirees happening a lot across traditional trade services. that aren't being backfilled with an ever increasing demand of aging infrastructure and component parts. An old adage of construction not being what it once was potentially. People doing unlicensed work or retrofits on things like that can all lead to ultimately an insurance claim or water damage. And in that instance, there's technology around that has been for years. They all operate very differently, but from a broad stroke, sensors that are either point of leak sensors or inline sensors or automatic water shutoff valves that can either use thresholds or machine learning, and all of these amazing technologies in place to try to help prevent that loss. Now, who's going to actually do it?
Right.
So Beagle comes in with the premise being we're here to help manufacturers, homeowners, insurance carriers, agencies, anybody who's interested in that, to try to adopt that technology to actually become that kind of last mile resource to help install it simply.
So we're always interested in, the story of, how the hell did you end up here? And, but because you're talking about something that might not be an apparent problem when people are looking at this from the outside in, like, oh, we'll just buy this device and we'll put it in and that'll be great, right?
Right.
We'll have it. So to talk about how you identified this as even an issue, as a problem.
Yeah, well, the scale of the problem is huge, right? And you just look at, homes will suffer leaks. 2% of homes per year will suffer some type
Which
of
translate that into a number.
Well, if you look at, let's take, kind of an immediately addressable market. So if you're looking across all property types and all systems where there's flowing water, I kind of tongue in cheek, but it's very true, say, well, what's the addressable market for this kind of technology? And my response is really, well, is there water? So if you have piping and you have a pressurized water system, there's an opportunity for a leak to occur and for damage to occur following that. But when you look at just only standalone single family homes in the United States, not counting multifamily, not counting mixed use, not counting commercial, not counting condos or townhomes, apartments, only standalone single family homes, there's over 100 million of those in the United States.
Good
and
Lord.
more being built every year. And that is really where our expertise at Beagle has come into play around trying to really solve that problem first. We do commercial work in some instances. We do some apartment sensor deployments and things like that. But the bread and butter of the company is truly, at least right now, there's a lot of opportunity for continued changing that and expanding it. But for the last couple of years, it's really been focused on expansion of the technology and adoption across the standalone single family property. So how did we find that? Is to get back to the question, Rob, is I was an executive at Flow Technologies, which the founder you had on the podcast a couple of years back.
Yeah.
I was an early executive there following the Series A and investments that they brought in. I knew the founder, and we were looking at how to continue to grow the product category and to get adoption there. That business, part of what I did at that business was help oversee the insurance party relationships as a path to market for the valve. So it was very apparent early on that personal lines insurers wanted to solve this water damage problem. And now there was continued advancements in the technology, that product being one of several, that could help mitigate that loss cause. And we were constantly working with insurance carriers to help try to get that technology deployed. And in some instances, looking at how can we get as many of them deployed across the country as we possibly can to help prevent the problem, because it's such a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
But then looking at that and saying, well, who's going to actually do it? So you can ship the product. Does it sit on the shelf? It doesn't do anybody any good in that instance. So, into building out independent contractor networks and starting to try to work with local pros on the ground to do installations at the request of the insurance carrier partnerships and distribution channels was really kind of shine the light on the scale of the problem that Beagle has kind of stepped in to try to help fill that void.
And so who are your customers? Are your customers the insurance companies?
The customers are kind of a swath of, or a combination of the insurance carriers, the agencies, and the homeowners.
Okay.
It depends upon at what point in the customer journey we get involved on who the real kind of end customer is. But in every instance, the homeowner is the one that's ultimately interacting with the system when they're the occupant of the property, for example. But in a homeowner's journey of their insurance for the property, we can get involved at the point of binding. We can get involved pre-binding during like the real estate transaction. We can get involved at renewals. We get involved at post-loss circumstances. And this kind of goes down a path around the varying ways and kind of the expansive nature in which all of the partners that we have are trying to solve the problem. Because at any point, that referral can come in and the customer can be the carrier, the agent, the homeowner, the manufacturer even. And in that instance, it just depends where we jump in.
And so let's go back maybe 7 years ago. IoT was all the rage. It was InsureTech. InsureTech is going to change because we have these devices and they're going to fix your water problem. And we found that, and I may be putting words in here, but we found that it was hard to install the shutoff. So we kind of went to the devices that will detect the water leakage, right? Our notions and our things like that, where we're just looking at the water and we're trying to find it, and then we let the homeowner know, and then they'll go shut it off. Has there been studies done to help us really know what's the most important? Like, what is the best avenue? Is it really to have devices that shut off the water? Is that the way to really mitigate these losses? What have we learned in our studies?
Versus an alarm, right?
An alarm that just lets the insured know that, hey, you might have a problem.
Yeah. The industry has and everybody has a little bit of a different data set on it, but the industry has broadly leaned toward the flow-based automatic water shutoff valves as kind of the standard for what is ultimately, needed to meet the underwriting guideline. So the reason for that, beyond sensors only, is less because you're trying to eliminate a claim, although that does happen very frequently. And there are studies that have been done, one of which I helped lead with between Flow, now Moen, and LexisNexis several years ago, was showing very large benefit from not only claim mitigation, but also severity mitigation. So not just the propensity to have a claim, but also the severity decreasing if there was a claim. Now, the reason why is because you actually have the ability to shut the water off. So when you see the earliest kind of movers in requiring the installation of the technology for a policy is the automatic water shutoff being necessary for secondary properties. And that's because an alarm in that instance doesn't do any good.
Like a vacation home.
That makes total
sense. Yeah, a vacation home, right? So and even if what's interesting and what you learn over time in being with the space as we have for so long is that many homeowners don't even know where their shutoff valve is.
Yeah.
So to the extent that they even have, a water bug chirping, making an alarm or something to that effect, or a flow-based system at some point on the line, if they didn't put it on, saying, hey, you've got a leak, is that, if they're not there to shut it off, or they don't know where to shut it off, even if they are home, you continue to have that loss and that challenge.
Like Lee was saying, in the early days of our podcast, we had several IoT people on. Like I'm thinking about, I think it was Root. No, it was
Roost.
Roost.
Yeah,
Thank
Roost.
you. Thank you. I was close. I was just missing an S.
Were they the battery company? They did the battery?
There was a battery you put inside of it.
Yeah. Okay.
And they had a number of different devices, not just water detection, but a number of different devices. Anyways, we had, Hippo on, and Hippo was giving away IoT devices, which was a great idea on the one hand.
Yeah.
But you guys hit on the biggest problem with those giveaways. And that is they tend to sit in the closet waiting to be used.
I still have some in my closet in my master bedroom right now.
And in fact, I'm glad you brought that up, Lee, because Paul, the price for being on our podcast
Is come install these things.
is coming to install these, right? At no charge, of course.
Of course.
Because what do you think, we do this for nothing? Oh wait, we do this for nothing. Anyways, it wasn't people being excited about getting it. It was people being excited about installing it, whatever the device may be. Is that part of why you exist?
Yeah, exactly. So the systems that sit in your closet, like both of you have, for example, aren't doing anybody any good in that instance, right? So it's not doing any risk mitigation. It's not preventing you from having a leak or staying in your home longer if a pipe were to burst or things like that. So what happens in kind of the learnings, a lot of it is technological advancement, right? To try to make it as easy as you can to increase adoption. But when you still need some level of third-party intervention for an installation to occur, whether that's a white glove sensor deployment, which Beagle does, that we have people out on the team who only install sensors, not plumbers. They just go around the various regions where we do business, and we'll put sensors around apartments and things like that, because that's what's needed for the client in that respect, and the client's not going to do it themselves. From a valve perspective, that barrier gets even higher because it's cutting the pipe and it's installing a system that can shut the water off on you when you're in the shower, for example. Now, understanding how that works is a big value proposition that we provide to be able to help train the homeowner on which systems we're installing and why, and how they can manually or remotely operate the system from their phone or from a control panel. But you really get into this kind of question around adoption, around what kind of skin does the homeowner have in the game to get involved.
Exactly.
And I think what's pretty much been universally found, I'd imagine, people might dispute this, but I would think that most people would agree, if you were to give it away, the homeowner has no incentive to act. And so you see the take rate on free giveaways maybe be high, but then the ultimate deployment rate, you have a dramatic drop off.
Right.
And in that instance, we try to help make that more seamless to increase the adoption. And we can help that from a technological standpoint, but also I think I advise carriers all the time not to do free programs. It might work for like a pilot, but when you're looking at a scaled deployment, we've done programs where it's free to the homeowner, and then we show up to go install a valve, and the homeowner says, I don't want it anymore.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You do get that? I was wondering if you get that.
Charged them. Yeah. Had you maybe even charged them $99, the likelihood of them just turning you away at the door or not telling their spouse that you were coming that day to come do the installation so that the spouse turns you away when you show up, all these various things that kind of get in the way when you're dealing with people's time and the physical nature of the industry. I find that if you figure out how to decrease the price friction, but still have some type of skin in the game, so to speak.
Right. There's a fine point.
Yeah. That you
in
said.
that.
That's funny, because I was just thinking, why don't you just do it all, right? Charge a premium for an insurance policy or a new home, or just do it all. But even then, they just might not show up. They might say, I don't want it. I never even thought about that as an option. Because I personally might be that same type of person who's like, I don't want that.
Yeah, I think over time, this is like a future state of the space. I think you will over time see more of these different kind of stakeholders in the chain start becoming more vertically integrated. Mm-hmm. And you've seen that sometimes with insurance carriers partnering with warranty companies, or insurance carriers like in Chubb even now owns their own automatic water shutoff valve. So there's a bunch of different ways that people are kind of pairing up in this instance, but there has not been a full suite vertical integration yet. That one day will happen. It'll just be kind of a.
I could see carriers. I live in California, and we recently were canceled by our longtime insurer. I mean, more than 20 years, insurance company, for fairly ridiculous reason, but it was basically because they didn't want to be in California anymore. So, but because as you know, you live in California, there's all kinds of problems we have here. And I could see a day where carriers, so the carrier that I ended up going with, that wrote us, which was really no problem, offered me a number of discounts to participate in a series of different device options, of which I took them up on some, because they were things that I understand and I know from doing this podcast. But I could see a day where carriers are requiring a homeowner to install a device or another. Are you seeing that? Is that happening yet, where it's a condition of binding?
Yes, that's happening now. It's happening obviously as regulated as the carriers are. It happens on a state-by-state basis on how they can get their filings done. And they have to walk a line with the DOI in each state, but also with their marketing and their homeowners around what kind of, how demanding they're being to even be in market in that respect. But we are seeing, particularly in cat loss prone states, more requirements around products and services that could help prevent the non-cat losses. A lot of that, I believe, for the carriers to make sure they can stay in those states. And if you look at areas that have high propensity for cat loss, they also tend to be high net worth areas, as well as very high density areas around, of the states just generally. You look at, the Dallas major metros that now freeze periodically, that aren't built from an infrastructure standpoint to withstand that. Look at even freezes happening in areas like the Metro Atlanta region this year. Florida obviously has a different set of cat loss issues and challenges. California with the fires and horrific events like that just happened. So you have carriers that are, they have to, in order to stay in business, they have to be able to maintain that generic or that broad premium take, because it helps just offset and run their whole business. And when folks do make large moves, like say, we're not going to do business in California anymore, they have to make sure that they can make up for that potential lost premium in other areas in order to make sure that they still stay in business. So we do see an ever increasing amount of requirements of smart valve installations to bind coverage or to maintain coverage of renewals. We're seeing those thresholds drop from like a value standpoint. So if you have coverage of over 5 million, you're required to have a valve. We're starting to see that come down to like 2 million, 1.5 million. And then ultimately, it's my belief that, and the carriers below that, even some of the carriers that play in that space, also will provide some type of incentive. So you get 5% off your premium or 10% off your premium, that kind of thing. I ultimately believe that will go away. And that will be
the incentives.
The incentives will go away because it'll just be part of the underwriting. And if they are kept, it'll be because they're elevated enough elsewhere where the math just continues to pencil out well for them. And the incentive will go away. It'll just be part of the underwriting. If you want coverage, you have to do these 5 things or focused on risk mitigation.
So you guys are basically ending up hooking up with carriers that are playing in that pool where they want these devices in place, and maybe conditionally, maybe not conditionally, I don't know, but as they write new policies, they want a flow device of some sort, inline flow device installed, and they want it installed properly. And the homeowner is probably happy to have a professional who specializes in this to do it. Correct? Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a very niche thing. And one of the interesting points that's, the next step from that is it's not just the carriers, but now the brokers and the agencies are having to pay attention.
Yeah, tell us about that.
6 years ago, there'd be inbound from a carrier saying, hey, we think these valves are fantastic. We want to try them out. We want to get more people to adopt them across our book. So we're going to buy 10 of them. We'll pay for the installation across 10 of our top performing brokers or highest volume brokers in the market. And we'll get it on their house. Then they'll become the sales agent because the tech is so cool. And that sounds excellent, right? But then you think about why that agent is so successful a lot of the time is because they're an excellent people person and they have great conversations. They make you feel good all the time. And they tend to, if you're talking about something you don't necessarily know about or up and coming technology, you're not usually going to like risk the relationship with the client around that. So you would see a lot of those types of distribution models not work as well as we would hope. But that's changed now because the brokers and the agents have to be aware of it. Now there's no longer the option of, carrier A is requiring you to have it, carrier B doesn't. So let's just move you to carrier B. Now carriers A, B, and C, and D are all requiring you to have it. So now we have to figure out how we're going to get this done to maintain that relationship and to have those good conversations. So a lot of my time now is spent doing agency trainings
that makes sense.
across the country and talking to brokers and saying like, hey, here's how you talk about the tech. Here's how they all work. Here are pictures of them. Here's how the common pushback you get from clientele around why they can't have it or why they don't want it. All that kind of stuff is something that I spend a lot of my time doing nowadays.
But if they want a policy, they're going to have to take it.
That's becoming the market. So if you want to have a policy, this is for at your level, right? As those levels continue to erode, you have to understand this tech and you have to be able to at least figure out how to get your clients.
Right.
Well,
and it's going to, yeah.
Well,
Go ahead, Lee.
you have some great partners listed on your website. I mean, you have a lot of the tech first companies that we've had on the podcast in the past, so I know it's important to them. So I think that's really neat that you're doing that. I want to talk a little bit about your business model, not the inner workings necessarily, but how do you service these individuals, and what states are you in? Do you have a network of people you're working with? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we started the business, and this got into something earlier that we were asking about, and that was, why did we name the company Beagle?
Yeah.
And part of it is because of the concept around trustworthiness.
Okay.
So we structured the business differently from traditional services companies and from networks because we knew that the problem existed for the deployment of the technology at a large distributed scale from both the manufacturers and from the insurers. And what I mean by that is when I was first, conceiving the idea of the business, it was, well, we should maybe only start in a very hyper local geography and kind of iron it out and then expand from there. But in order to work with the carrier partners and solve their problem of doing it at scale, then I would be no different than how they were currently operating. Mm-hmm. So we started, which was just managing distributed networks of thousands of pros, which is what we were also doing at the last business. And so we started knowing that we wanted to employ the first kind of level of response, meaning like actually hire the plumbers W-2, not do it as a 1099 third-party contractor network, and do it distributed. So the reason why Beagle is not physically present in every state is because we're employing the pros, and it's expensive to do that.
This is not a 1099 model.
This is not a 1099 model. At the next level of scale, it's a hybrid. Mm-hmm. And that is because we get a lot of recurring requests for service from our customer base that we're not structured to serve. That could be serviced by a 1099 model. Come replace fixing a leaking faucet or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. Now, what we can help with and primarily help with are that first touch of that client interaction from the carrier referral or the carrier partner referral that says, this person needs a valve because it's required on their policy, or this person needs a valve to get a premium discount. We're starting to see more inbound, especially in the high net worth category, of sellers of properties putting valves on the houses because they know that the buyer is going to need one for coverage. So it makes the home more marketable.
Yeah.
Huh.
So we're starting to see that. I've seen a few homes actually fall out of escrow because there was the inability to put a valve on the property, and then the buyer couldn't get mortgage insurance, and then they couldn't close the loan. So the closing fell through. So there's some instances where we structured the business with the concept of trustworthiness and to be able to, quote, sniff out leaks, so to speak, hence the alarm nature of the loud beagle bark, and being able to really do that at scale and now launch across with full-time employees being in 17 states to help service major metro areas. That's with one full-time W-2, sometimes as many as 6 in any of those major metro markets.
Sure. Now, what devices do you guys work with? Not brands, but what types of devices or plumbing stuff do you guys do or install?
The major thing generally, the largest one that we do is from volume standpoint are any of the inline automatic water shutoff valves. Mm-hmm. So the ones that involve cutting the pipe, draining the system, putting the measuring, cutting, putting the valve on, provisioning it to the homeowner's Wi-Fi or to the cell network or to the hub or however the valve particularly connects in that type of technology, training the homeowner. So doing the smart valves is the top service ticket that we do. Beyond that, we're also doing the sensor deployments. Mm-hmm. So sometimes those are done in conjunction with the valve. Sometimes they're done independently from the valve. I can talk a lot about that technically, but I'll probably put the audience to sleep. So we have the valves themselves, the sensors. We also are a licensed plumbing company, so we do help with homeowners with things that they ask us about, but non-commissioned. So we're very sensitive to the carrier and the agent relationship. And we want to make sure that when we're in there to do something at the request of the carrier, that the homeowner doesn't feel like they're being upsold. So like we're not there testing the water for water quality or looking at the age of, we are looking at the age of the water heater, but not to try to say, oh, well, it's going to expire in 5 years. You should get a new one today kind of thing. We're doing things that are all specifically geared toward making the home more resilient from a water damage perspective. So valves, sensors, supply lines to appliances and fixtures, water heaters, and then if homeowners ask, things like water filtration and stuff like that.
Do you install water heaters?
We do, yeah.
Okay. And is that by request of the homeowner?
Yes.
Okay. And I just think this is so interesting. So if you're installing a valve, is it typically something that's prescribed by the carrier? Use this brand, or here's 3 brands that we want you to use, or what's that? How? Because I'm kind of feeling like maybe the carrier has they have a tremendous financial interest in these things working, right? But if the homeowner's paying for it, well, they don't have skin directly in the transaction.
Very, very rarely do any of the carriers say you have to have this product type. If ever. They might not ever say that. There might be a few instances where they do, but it's not because that's the one that has to be on the home. The carriers will always allow some type of nuance in the language where it qualifies from an underwriting standpoint to be a flow-based automatic water shutoff valve, as the verbiage du jour, so to speak. So the carriers do have particular, and brokers also independent of their carrier relationships, have particular manufacturer relationships where the manufacturers will negotiate some type of discount on the product for the homeowner to buy it through that promo code with XYZ carrier or agent. But in those instances, that's usually just a marketing relationship. It's not like a required component. So you can have a carrier that lists 3 different manufacturers on their website, but a homeowner could get a 4th different manufacturer product, provided that it meets the underwriting guidelines that carrier has. And that's the way that the structures currently work in most instances. So anybody listed on a carrier website is usually not because that's the only qualifying product. It's because those are the ones that they have relationships with where they're trying to give the homeowner a better incentive to adopt. And those products do meet the underwriting requirements. But there could be more that also meet the requirements that just aren't listed.
Are there Are there new trends coming out with water cutoff or water detection devices? Are we seeing new technologies that are better than they were 6 years ago? Or are we kind of stable with we see water, we shut it off, it's done? What do you see in there?
Yeah, the technology is getting better,
Okay.
and the technologies are becoming more robust. And the best example of that is, originally there were just sensors that would, right? Then sensors that were tied to a shutoff. So if water hit the sensor, then it would tell the shutoff to actuate, and then the water flow would stop. And now you have products that work with only the shutoff being the monitor, where you have that being the flow-based or the pressure-based or however temperature-based, that how it's monitoring the water flow through the system. They all do it very differently to be able to, or some do it differently, to be able to determine if there's water flow rate that could be anomalous, that could be a leak, and then telling the valve to shut off. Now, you have various combinations of those systems that lead to different levels of security, so to speak. And that is where you have a sensor underneath a sink that's capturing maybe a leaking garbage disposal or trap under the sink. That's not going to tell the valve to shut off. But then you also have a sensor behind the washing machine where if the supply line to the washing machine busts off, it immediately tells the valve to shut off. So you have the systems kind of start to work together in that respect. There's a number of new entrants in the space also that have different types of sensing technology, whether they're doing that based on pressure or temperature, or they have their sensors aren't just like the traditional kind of puck, however shaped, right? The little discs or ovals or whatever, squares, where you then have a mat or like a 3D printed strip that you can kind of dynamically change the shape of to be able to work within the kind of system that you're, or the property that you're working in. So the hardware is changing. The algorithms are changing. The way that the hardwares talk to each other are changing. So, being able to say, I know that this is a shower, and then the shower tells the valve it's the shower so that not to shut off. Or you can isolate pool fillers or irrigation systems so that the valves know not to actuate in instances where an automatic pool filler may be flowing extra given
large sums of water.
Yeah, exactly. So it is getting much more advanced in its level and ability to detect and to kind of mitigate false positive shutoffs, but there's a lot of room to continue to improve there from a technology standpoint.
That makes sense.
I just think this is fantastic. So when you talk about sensors, that you guys also install sensors, you're talking about these related sensors that are part of the water shutoff ecosystem.
Yes. And there are sensors that also do more than that. So there are sensors that can do temperature, humidity, moisture, all of the above.
Right.
And it just really kind of depends upon the client's circumstance and what's needed from the protection level for that.
Well, that's interesting. So there may be a sensor that tells the shutoff valve, hey, it's time to shut off.
Yes, or not, right? You could put a humidity sensor in the wine cellar, and then you could have another sensor in the wet bar that's in the wine cellar, and one of them is checking for humidity, and the other is checking if the ice maker breaks. And if the ice maker breaks, it's telling the valve to shut off. If the humidity sensor is going off, then you better get down there and make sure you're not turning your collection into vinegar.
So I want to ask you about working with carriers, because I'm sure you found that to be fascinating already. Lee and I work with carriers and have worked with carriers for many, many years, and we have a basic understanding of what it's like to what matters to them and how challenging it can be to get them to adopt something that's a new idea, right? The interesting thing about your new idea is that it's not revolutionary. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm just saying it's not like it's a technology that's never been seen before. This is people installing devices in homes. And it's just a very interesting twist and specialty upon it. What's the reception been like with the carrier community, and what's it been like for you guys working with that?
It's been very positive, and they've been very thankful that we exist. I mean, this was part of the genesis of even starting the business to begin with. Was we knew that the problem was present at a big scale, and that was we believed in the cat losses continuing to get worse. We believed that aging infrastructure was going to continue to create non-weather water-led damage as a leading cause of preventable claims. And that was only going to continue to be exacerbated. So the general idea was the wave of demand is going to continue to grow, and the carriers are going to continue to need a way to be able to solve it. And when we launch a new market, what we do it all based on demand. And that would be one of the more recent markets we launched was Seattle. And to be able to launch Seattle, it took us a little while to do it, but it was just based off of our known carrier relationships saying, can you guys please get to Seattle? I want to make sure that I've got clients that need your service there, because and we've worked with somebody in Texas or California or Florida or something to that effect. And then that agent says, well, I've got another client who's got a home in Seattle, but you're not there. They're getting the requirement. Who do I go to? How do I help? And so we're able to then to be able to help with that respect. So are we able to do it at the scale that we want to do it? Not yet. I think, selling through carriers as a path to market is time consuming. They're just really big. And then it takes a lot, and they have a lot of initiatives going on. They cover a lot of losses. There's not only claims perspectives, how I think historically, I'll pause for a second. This is a really interesting shift. Historically, a lot of what we do is looked at as, and we've talked about it a lot through the lens of risk mitigation. What's starting to flip is it's actually revenue generation. And that is an inflection point in the market now, where you will no longer be in business as a carrier in certain states or at the scale that you want to be in business, given pulling out of the largest, population density state in the country because you can't afford to do business in it anymore. That's billions of dollars of lost premium, which they need to run the business and to run the business well and profitably, or if they're an exchange, give that back to the exchange. So when you look at that, the technology actually becomes revenue generative, not just risk mitigation, because it allows you to keep and continue to write premium in areas that you wouldn't otherwise be able to write. You would be pulling out given the other macro pieces. So I think that's a major inflection point that hasn't been proven yet, but will be proven over the next, call it 5 years, around the risk mitigation actually being a revenue driver, not just a loss mitigator.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, because they're not concerned about the transactional money involved in what you're doing. They're interested in that it enables them to stay in force.
Yeah, they are interested in the amount of money that we're charging, as they should be, right? Because but their clients are being treated well, and that there's actually that you can get the adoption. Because if we charged $1 million every time we rolled a truck, we would be out of business the day we started the company, right? Nobody would take you up on that. So there is there is interest, obviously, in making sure that people are getting a fair price for the service, and that the economies of the general work are played out appropriately and fair, and we do a very good job with that, I believe. The interest is in how do you continue to find that nuance and what the market dictates as a price point for the service that allows the increased adoption to then feed through to better business for the carriers as well.
Well, I just think the whole thing is fascinating, and a good friend of ours, and maybe the only water shutoff valve nerd. That's right. There is one. His name is Adam Kostecki.
Yes.
And Adam is how it is that we got your name, because the one water shutoff valve nerd who used to work in a laboratory where they had I don't know how many, a bunch of them all set up.
He probably had
so
multiple
that they
on
could
his
see how
pipe.
they work and test them. And he had them in his house, and the guys, there's only one Adam Kostecki. And I encourage any of you who know him, if you ever have a chance to sit with him for 10 minutes, you should do that.
Absolutely.
He's a great guy. but he told us about you, and but and so when he first told us about you, we thought it was so amazing because it was a big problem. What you guys are addressing is a big, quiet problem. And I frequently think that the best ideas that happen, particularly in the insurance industry, are the simplest ideas, right? And that's not to say that your business is simple, because it's not. I mean, I think operationally it's probably quite challenging. But the idea, I just love it. I think we commend you, and I know Adam feels the same way.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and Adam's a great guy, and like you said, there are very few people in the space who understand and have been in the space as long as Adam has, and some of us have, to that can understand kind of the evolution of the category and have seen the adoption change over time. And from our standpoint, it's really just, this is an obvious problem. So how do you solve this obvious problem and step in and increase the adoption of the technology because of how much good it can do, not only from a water damage loss prevention standpoint, but disruption of people's lives. It doesn't have the visceral fear that fire or theft have, which lends more toward like that, oh my gosh, I have to move on this and act on this immediately. But it has a maybe, arguably a even greater macro impact when it comes to keeping people in their properties and their homes, preventing loss, allowing businesses to continue to operate and insure homeowners, and to do that at great scale.
Right.
So, that's really the goal.
Right. It's a very enlightened approach. Like I mentioned at the top that I was recently canceled by my insurance company because in California, they don't need a lot of reasons for that to happen. But I had an overhanging tree. Now, they never contacted me and said, here's somebody who's been with them 20 plus years, never had a claim. Not one. And they didn't contact me and say, hey, here's the name of 2 tree trimming companies who work directly with us, who can trim your tree, and then we can renew you. They just said, you need to do this or you're non-renewed. And I think you hit the nail on the head. My premium, not just this year, but for years to come, just walked out the front door.
Yeah.
Right. And if you need to know if anyone's upset about it, just call my agent here in town.
Of course, because now that premium is gone. And the commission is gone.
Correct.
And one of the things, and you as a homeowner, you don't have that opportunity, as great of a client as you've been for 20 plus years, to figure out how to solve that issue and just maintain your coverage, even if that does change slightly, as it would over time. Mm-hmm. But there are some carriers that are taking a more holistic approach to all of the loss causes. I know that some of them actually do have vendor tree cutter partners.
Yeah, sure.
Things like that. But that's what we're trying to really fill that gap from a water standpoint. So for carriers that maybe listen to your podcast, or carriers that see me speaking at various insurance industry events and things like that, really, sure, you can tell a client they have to get it done, but you're going to have a hard time keeping that premium if the client is left to just do it themselves. And then you ask them for proof 11 months later and they haven't done it. And then they either call me with a week left to go in the month, say, get out here now and put the thing on my house, I'm going to get canceled. And we say, we can't make it because we're booked, but call them and try to get an extension. Yeah. And they say, it's my 3rd one. Like these are real life examples that have happened. And then, then they lose that premium. And it's just for lack of the ability to say, not only you have to do this, but here's how you do it. Mm-hmm. And to be able to fill that gap to keep everybody, better insured and have a good relationship and hopefully prevent some life disruption.
Well, we love the concept. We love the product, and we look forward to hearing about it again. So come back in a year and tell us what's happening in the world of water shutoffs. Maybe next time we'll have Adam join us
Ooh, that'd be good.
so that he can geek out.
Oh, we'll do that for sure, and we'll check in a year and see if your sensors are still sitting on your shelves.
That's good. I might go dust them off and bring them on down. We'll see. Well,
Thanks,
Paul.
Thank you all so much.
So when Adam first told me about this and told me about Paul and his company, and he was super excited about it, I didn't really appreciate his excitement. After that today, I'm a lot more excited about it. I think that
all in.
I just think it's very clever, and I understand how carriers think, right? And carriers like to have a single solution provider to cover their territory, whatever it may be. And I think it's probably complicated thing to roll out and to do, certainly to do it with a W-2 model. And I wish them all the best. I think it's a great thing. I mean, how many times have you and I talked about IoT devices that aren't installed?
I bet 50 times, because a lot of them, they're kind of complicated, kind of hard. I mean, and even for me, we've talked a lot of times about, like, my parents, they might have one. They're not going to do it. So having somebody who, especially with the inline water detection, I can't go out there and do that. I don't know what I'm doing. So to have a service who specializes, that's where it's at.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how it continues to roll out, and it'll be interesting to talk to them in a year or two, and see what's happening. But I have to believe, like here in California, maybe it's not a water shutoff device, maybe it's a different kind of device, that carriers are going to require that these things exist, because they've gutted policies as far as they can.
Or especially in the excess surplus line, where they're able to do more interesting things.
Where they're able to
I can very much see the dictate come in that way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you have a high risk home, get used to it. It's gotta be coming.
But there's not. Well, you tell me the downside, right? Where's the downside? Nobody wants their. I have some friends today I just heard about. They have some water damage under their home. They didn't even know about it, and all of a sudden the toilet fell through the pier and beam, and now they're gonna have to gut their inside of their bathroom. They didn't know the water was leaking. So where's the downside to having an inline water thing that'll say, you got a small leak, let's start looking? I mean, there's no downside. So it's just getting it done.
It's like a ting.
I have it sitting right over there, right? I only need it when it tells me, but it just sits there.
I mean, you might not hear from it for 15 years.
That's right. But the one time it says, here you go.
It's important. It could make an enormous difference in your life.
I agree.
So, all those people in the IoT world, keep slugging away. We love it, and I love to hear. It was interesting to hear from him how things are changing and how things are evolving. As more data is coming in, they're changing how they think about it and how they go about it. It's very fascinating stuff.
I agree.
Big thanks to Paul Vacquier. There, I said it right.
Good job.
For being with us. And we'll say what we say to you every single wingle time. And that's to you, Mr. Boyd.
Goodbye, everybody.